Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring your curiosity, because here you'll find curiosities. I'm Wyatt Buckner of the Duluth News Tribune, and I will be your guide as we discover the unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this episode, we look at one of the North Shore's most popular beaches, which is made of mining pollution. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. To tell us about this popular summer stop in our region and how it came to be, I'm joined again by News Tribune reporter Jimmy Lovrien. Jimmy, it's great to have you back.
Hey Wyatt, good to be here.
So Jimmy, there's lots of beaches along the North Shore. When we drove up to this one in particular, we mentioned a couple of them. You had mentioned Iona Beach, which you labeled as Singing Beach.
Yeah, the Singing Pink Beach. Yep, with all natural pink stone and makes some sounds as the waves recede. Yep.
Mm-hmm. But tell me about this particular popular beach and what makes this one stand out from the rest.
Yeah, Black Beach is probably the one that appears most on social media and the internet right now. Obviously, there are beaches all along the North Shore and have their own qualities, but this one is fairly new. It's only been a park for, since 2016, I think it was established as a park in Silver Bay. And before that, it's old North Shore mining property. It is their property still, and people used it, but it was technically trespassing. Now, through a formal agreement between North Shore Mining, the city of Silver Bay, and the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, it is kind of been formalized and open for folks to come down and picnic, play in the sand. It's attached to a campground, a mini golf course. There's the adventure park across the street. So it's kind of been the hub of tourism in Silver Bay. Obviously, Tedagooch State Park is right outside Silver Bay, and there's Split Rock and everything just south of Silver Bay. So, rather than driving between state parks, people are now stopping in Silver Bay and checking out this Black Beach that they maybe have seen photos of online on social media, and it gets busy there. In the summer on a warm day, it's cars backed up all the way to Highway 61, parked on both sides of the road, and people trying to cool down on a interesting black sand, in quotations, sand beach that has just exploded in popularity.
Yeah, so what exactly is Black Beach? Why is there this quote-unquote black sand along this section of the North Shore?
Right, and so unlike Hawaii, which has black sand beaches from volcanoes, the sand made up of pulverized volcanic rock at some point, that is not the case with this. This is mining tailings. So for 25 years, the Reserve Mining Company, which is kind of the precursor to Cleveland Cliffs' North Shore Mining there in Silver Bay, dumped their tailings or waste rock right into Lake Superior. And until 1980, when they completed a tailings basin a few miles inland that, now all the tailings go behind this big dam a few miles inland and, is designed to keep them out of Lake Superior because the lake was turning green. They would drift. Many of them stayed right here and formed this delta of basically extended land from the shore made up of tailings, which is what the beach is. But some were found, miles away. There was asbestos-like fibers found in Lake Superior and in the drinking water of Duluth because they weren't filtering it at that time. So that it became a real public health concern, and eventually they were required to stop that and build a place to store them that isn't the lake. So all those tailings are still in the lake. There's grass and trees and other things growing on it, and this section has kind of been formed into this nice beach from the waves, and so that's how it came to be. It is not that natural volcanic sand. It is tailings, which, to explain what those are, the taconite is mined in the ground, and it's the iron that they want is kind of mixed in with all sorts of different things. So they pulverize that rock they pulled from the ground, break it up into bits and pieces, really tiny, fine pieces, and then use magnets to get that iron that they want out. And everything else that did not stick that magnet at that time would just be dumped into the lake. Figure is 67,000 tons per day. So there's a lot of acreage of this delta formed by tailings there, right on the edge of their plant at Silver Bay.
So for about how long were they dumping these tailings into the lake? I know you said it was kind of around 1980 where they were able to move it over to that basin that they created. But how long before that were they doing this?
Yeah, so they started that in 1955. That's when this was the first taconite plant in Minnesota, and so that's when it started. So for 25 years, that up to 67,000 tons of tailings per day sent straight into the lake down this chute. And, I think if people remember, Time Magazine or other, the local paper and everything showing just that chute of just straight into the lake. I think that image is seared in a lot of people's minds who remember that and remember kind of the unknowns of what it meant for that to be in the lake, and then finding the asbestos-like fibers in the lake. And that was kind of when asbestos was people were figuring out and knowing that it was bad and causing mesothelioma. But, here you get something that sure looks like it. What does that mean for public health rather than breathing it in? Drinking it or breathing it in if you live in Silver Bay or work in the plant. But what does it mean for all the communities along the Lake Superior that drew their water from the lake? That was a big unknown for a long time, and is kind of just starting now to people kind of figure that out and what it really means for public health. Nothing's ever settled, but scientists have a better idea of what it means. But yeah, no, I mean, I think the people remember in the 70s in Duluth, that they were advised to go drink filtered water. And so I was reading about, the fire department would put a filter on their water source, and people would go fill up jugs there. Then there was, purified or filtered water available at the grocery store people would buy. And that's because Duluth's water treatment facility would not filter the water at that time, because like Superior water, it's clear there's not a whole lot of dissolved solids in the water that they had to worry about. But then, just before the EPA lawsuit against reserve mining to get them to stop dumping these tailings on the lake, right before that trial began, that's when the discovery of those asbestos-like fibers in the lake became public and ultimately traced back to these tailings.
So how long did that concern about the drinking water kind of last for?
Yeah, you still hear those concerns today. People who remember the 70s and the reserve mining case, which was a landmark environmental case. People remember that and still wonder. But, filters have been installed and stuff. And now, people love Duluth's clean drinking water and seem to not really worry about that anymore.
Yes, I know that they were kind of forced to stop by that lawsuit. Were they required to do any cleanup?
No, it's still there. That delta that formed is North Shore mining property. They've got some of their different facilities that they use there at their taconite plant, which is still up and running. Of course, bringing their tailings over to the basin now instead. But it's ground now. It's earth. Things are growing on it. Its facilities are on it, and so yeah, no, all of that is still there.
Wow. And so some of that's still like washing up, like adding more onto the beach?
Yeah, I think maybe it moves a little bit around there, but I think for the most part, the waves kind of carved it in, or because that delta, the Black Beach is kind of the northernmost part of that delta formed by tailings. And so if anything, it was kind of shaped by the waves, but has been there, for the last 40, since tailings were being dumped there. So yeah.
So now we kind of have the history laid out of why this taconite tailings were in the lake and for how long. Talking about how the beach kind of came about and when did people kind of start venturing out, and I know you said it was initially basically trespassing to go and enjoy the beach.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like, for Silver Bay residents, it was not all that uncommon just to go down there and hang out. I mean, yeah, I was technically trespassing. And so I don't know, how well enforced that was at the time. It sounds like it was fairly common, kind of a local spot that, Silver Bay and North Shore residents knew about. But it wasn't until kind of the 2010s, mid 2010s, when, the idea of maybe making it a public park came about. And so, it's still owned by North Shore Mining, but they're, through agreements and everything, it's essentially a public beach.
Over the years, how has it grown in popularity? I know you talk about how like in the summertime I can line up with cars, but you talk to me about the progression of how we kind of get to that point.
Yeah, I think social media kind of has driven the growth there. I think people, it's kind of that people find a beautiful spot, share it online, and people flock there, share their own photos. And I don't know if viral is the right word for this, but I think I hear people who are not from the area, who, either, know from my hometown in West Central Minnesota or, the Twin Cities, something like that, where they're like, hey, have you heard of that black beach? I just saw that on, the news, or I just saw that online, what is that about? And so, yeah, the last probably 5-6 years, especially, and, now that it's, you're good to go when you go down there, you're not trespassing anymore. That has really been when it's exploded. And piggybacking off of that, there's a campground down there now. That's new. And there's a mini golf course right there. They're both called Black Beach Campground and Black Beach, mini golf course, I believe. I don't know the exact name of it. But anyway, they're right there when you drive into the beach. And then across the street is the North Shore Adventure Park, where, it's kind of, you go harness into a climbing harness, and you're suspended above and, doing different obstacles and challenges, climbing wall kind of type stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of driven this, the North Shore has a tourist industry. Silver Bay was kind of an exception to that. Now that's changing. Silver Bay has kind of embraced that aspect of the North Shore, and it's kind of centered around Black Beach.
Mm-hmm. And you and we drove up there a few weeks ago on May 9th. It was a weekday, so and it was before summer season really hit. Things weren't quite getting fully green yet at that point. So we were kind of the only ones there when we went up there. And as I understand, that was your first time being the Black Beach. Is that correct? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. I think anytime I'm up the North Shore happens to be when everyone's at the Black Beach. And so I have bypassed it and, chosen to stop at maybe a quieter beach, either at a state park or near a trailhead or something like that. So yeah, no, I had never been there before. And so I had to see it for myself if I was going to be writing about it. And yeah, I think there was a couple that came just as we were leaving, but otherwise we had it to ourselves, which I'm sure today, where it's almost 80 degrees, is not the case.
Mm-hmm. And what was that experience like for you, seeing it for the first time? I know we weren't exactly there leisurely laying at the beach or anything. We were walking around getting visuals and just kind of getting a general feel for it. But what was that like for you?
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, it is beautiful, right? I mean, yeah, we can talk about the legacy that it's of mining pollution that it's built on, but the photos don't lie. It's awesome. I mean, you're on Lake Superior. You don't see that black, quote, sand anywhere else. There's, it's kind of built out into you can walk then to an island that's right out there that, looking at archival photos that, being able to walk there didn't exist until these tailings, the waves kind of formed them into that. So no, I mean, I get why people go there. I mean, there's still the legacy of mining. I mean, they're tailings, and it's kind of interesting to see, where coarse tailings wound up versus very fine tailings, and how they've, I don't know, sorted themselves is the right word, but some are like coffee grounds and what you'd think of as traditional sand, and some are, a little larger. But yeah, the legacy of mining is still obvious. I mean, the fence on the southern end of it, that's, it's big, no trespassing signs for North Shore mining, because just on the other side of that is where, their facilities begin, and the rest of the delta is where they've got things on. And also there was electrical wire, I assume is no longer used, but it was just like sticking out of the ground in two places and broken. Sounds like the waves over the winter kind of uncovered it. So yeah, there's still evidence, that this was an industrial site. But I get why people go there. It is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like an important question surrounding all of this, because obviously it's beautiful there, but it is also, as you mentioned many times here, mining pollution.
Right.
So just how safe are these taconite tailings on the beach? And an extra good reason to ask that question is, if you listened to the previous episode of the podcast, we mentioned that we had to switch around the order of our episodes a little bit, and that was partially because this episode was supposed to be last week, but you had trouble getting a direct answer to this question.
Yes.
So first off, what is the answer, and how did you go about getting that answer, and why did it take so long to get what should be a simple question? Is this safe to be around in this public setting that so many people go to check out in the summertime?
Right. Yeah, that took longer than I expected. And I had kind of gotten, I reached out to a lot of, a couple state agencies, the Natural Resources Research Institute up at UMD. Anyway, I kind of reached out to everyone, and everyone was kind of directing me to other agencies or other schools. I don't think, it wasn't, people study the tailings in different ways, but the public health question, I think, wanted to make sure someone in the public health world could answer it. And so finally, after felt like probably a week of trying. I was able to reach Dr. Jeffrey Mandel. He's a professor emeritus at University of Minnesota School of Public Health, and he studied the mesothelioma cases among taconite workers. So there was not too long ago, there was a real just increase in the number of taconite workers, people who had worked at some point in the taconite industry getting mesothelioma. And there was a big study to figure out what was causing that. I mean, I think a lot of people thought, well, if there's asbestos-like fibers found in the taconite, is that what's getting them sick? One thing to note is that those fibers are found more heavily on the eastern side of the Iron Range, considerably more. I mean, that's kind of like where they're found. And so, the taconite mine there, which is Peter Mitchell Mine near Babbitt. I mean, that's where North Shore gets its ore, and so that's where those fibers are found, and that's why North Shore is particularly unique in that way. Anyway, so he and others at the U of M School of Public Health, as part of the taconite workers' health study, looked into why these workers were getting sick, and kind of what they ultimately reached was it didn't seem to be the taconite. It was probably actual asbestos in the equipment or insulation in these plants that were getting them sick. So it's not the taconite itself. It was likely, before we knew what we knew about asbestos, and it was this miracle mineral thrown in everything for, fire retardant or insulation, whatever, or, to help. It's in a lot of flooring and other building materials for strength. It was like this. Yeah, it was put in everything for a few decades. And so the likely explanation is that exposure long term to that is what got these folks sick. That's because, as he explained, these asbestos-like fibers I've been talking about in the taconite are shorter, which means they're shorter than 5 microns long, and their length to width ratio is less than 3:1. Anything beyond that, that's the asbestos definition. And so what he said is these small fibers, they can get cleared out by the body easier. White blood cells engulf them, and they're attacked and taken out of the body that way. Whereas the long fibers, asbestos, they get trapped in the outer lining of the lung, cause irritation, and that's where the cancer, the mesothelioma, forms, is the lining of the lung, because those long fibers don't get processed in the body, they get stuck. And so he said, and again, the kind of the question is, what's, I think, because people have this historical memory of asbestos-like fibers and the reserve mining case, things dumped in the lake, and I think they wonder, well, now it's a beach, is it safe, right? Answer he said was, well, a day at the beach, a picnic, go for a swim, you're going to be fine. It's the long-term exposure. You're fine, one, because it's likely short, fibers. There's still some work by his former colleagues at the U of M looking into those short fibers. But, it's what causes, long-term damage and mesothelioma is long-term exposure. So unless you're down at the beach 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for a few years or whatever, working or playing that long, you're going to be fine. No, he didn't study, he's not studying the beach specifically, but he's studying taconite plants and taconite workers. And so you can apply some of those studies to this. And so, he said, you're largely going to be fine. One thing I had sent in my email, trying to get a hold of folks, is that he pointed out, I said, is this something people have to be worried about, or is that as benign as just beach sand, And something he said is like, well, you don't want to be exposed long-term to anything like that, even, because there's silica and there's other things in sands and minerals and stuff that are bad, right? I mean, there's a reason people wear masks when they are respirators, when they're sawing through concrete. There are things in there that once they're kicked up and get in your lungs can really cause damage. And so I thought that was interesting. There's a lot of things out there that if you're exposed to the dust of for a long time, you're going to have possibly some health impacts.
Well, it's good to hear that it's probably safe, especially for seeing that so many people venture out there, especially in the summertime. It was a little concerning for a moment there when you said you still were trying to get an answer for is it safe?
Right. Yeah, and I don't think it was ever like it wasn't some sort of secret. Even this, I think people, it's not hidden that these are taconite tailings. I think maybe some people that aren't from the region and don't have the historical memory of the 70s, this reserve mining case, probably just don't know that it's tailings and it's not a secret. But anyway, I think people were kind of cautious to weigh in because they didn't study this specifically. The beach scenario setting, impact on swimmers or picnickers, that has not been studied. It has been studied, in the industrial setting, in the taconite plants and workers from the plants and mines. That has been studied. Beachgoers on taconite tailings has not. And so I think people were just being extra cautious and making sure they wanted the right voice to speak to it. And so, Dr. Mandel was very helpful. And it sounds like there's still work being done. The science has never settled on things and things are complicated. And so he said his colleagues are still looking into those short fibers found in the taconite tailings that have been referred to as asbestos-like fibers. Those short fibers, which he explained seem to be ejected from the body pretty easily. There's still work to be done on that. People are still looking into that to know. And so this science is always moving forward and evolving, and more is becoming known about what's in there.
Yeah, I'm guessing the use of the word probably fine is likely intentional to not say with
Exactly.
100% certainty. Give just enough wiggle room there.
Right. I think his exact quote, let me pull it up here, is there might be some risk, but I think that would generally involve a much larger exposure where you're working or playing there day in and day out for year after year. So, and then he goes on to say, I guess I wouldn't be too concerned about that knowing what we know about short fibers. So.
Gotcha. So now that we know that's safe, we can go out there and we are not exposed ourselves by this May 9th visit.
Exactly. We're good to go.
Mm-hmm. So why did you feel it was important to look into this story further and to bring it here in Northlandia? Is it the kind of dichotomy between like nature meets industry?
Yeah, I think that is interesting. It's like, and I think part of the reason I wanted to do this is I don't want the pollution legacy of reserve mining, dumping tailings to be forgotten. We got this beach out of it, I guess, it's very beautiful there. But, you don't want that to sanitize what, really, I guess, was going on for so long. I mean, that was bad. I mean, that is something that would not be accepted by anyone today, industry or otherwise. So I don't want to cover up the legacy, I guess, of what was done. And so I think it's important people know where that black sand came from. That's tailings, and people remember the legacy of reserve mining and what was Lake Superior was once a dumping ground for waste. So I think it's important people know. And then, all those questions about safety I wanted to answer too, because I think when people remember the 70s and those images of the slurry of tailings being dumped into the lake and hearing things about asbestos-like fibers, I think they are curious, like, okay, so now there's a beach made out of it? I thought this was, whatever. And so again, it's kind of complicated, and, there's a legacy of pollution, and now going forward, that's resulted in this popular beach that has spurred, investment in tourist opportunities in Silver Bay, but I just want to make sure people know about the history of it.
All right, Jimmy, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks again for joining us. I know last time I tasked you with bringing me something that's as interesting, as fun as pinball. Well, I mean, I had the flashing lights as the pinball. This was definitely a nice scenic venture and an interesting look into the past.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe my next one will be a little bit more enjoyable. Well, stay tuned.
And thank you for joining us on this venture into Northlandia. To read the article for this week's column, as well as see photos and video produced by myself, visit duluthnewstribune.com/topics/Northlandia. You can find all the episodes of Northlandia on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you or someone you know has a unique story that you believe can have a place here in Northlandia, let us know by emailing northlandia@duluthnew's.com. Join us again next week and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss if you're on the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.